Carlos Guillermo Smith, good to see you.
Thank you for having me, Ryan.
You've been around this process for a while, but you were newly elected in November, so
that's right.
This will be your first time serving in this role as the state representative. I guess your thoughts as you get ready for something, even though you've been in it behind the scenes a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just eager to get to work on a lot of the issues that I've cared about for many years that actually mean a lot to a lot of Floridians that I represent. I am filing legislation that expands the Bright Future Scholarship Program, which has become out of reach for too many minority students and too many low-income students. I have filed legislation to restrict access to assault weapons and large-capacity magazines, like the weapon that was used at Pulse to kill 49 people last June. And so there's just a lot of issues that lawmakers are going to be tackling this session, and much of it actually has lots of bipartisan energy around.
You know, that's what's interesting. We were talking during the break. We know Republicans control the State House, which means you can continue to butt heads, or you can at some point try to find common ground. And you talked a lot about bipartisan efforts. What does that look like going into this session?
Well, what we're looking at is we're seeing a lot of bipartisan energy around supporting a ban on fracking. Fracking is the dangerous practice that can have a poisoning effect on our drinking water and also can fracture the state's very delicate ecosystem. I have also partnered up with Republican Senator Dana Young, who used to be the House Republican Majority Leader, to file legislation that will ban the use of anabolic steroids on greyhound racing dogs. We know that the use of this drug has had a lot of really negative side effects on the racing dogs. We're seeing bipartisan energy around decoupling, which means that a lot of the track owners will not be forced to race greyhounds, which I believe is an inhumane practice, just so that they can keep their card tables inside. A lot of the negotiating around the Seminole Compact. And then also a lot of bipartisan energy around expanding the Bright Futures Scholarship Program, particularly to allow students to use Bright Futures to pay for summer courses, and also some more investments in making sure that it pays for 100% of tuition.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned the Bright Futures Scholarship, and we just got a chance to see Governor Scott's budget, and that was included in there. I mean, this is a $80-some billion budget. There is a lot. You realize how much the state of Florida is responsible for. Anything jump out to you, or what are some of the key things when you look at that budget that you're interested in?
Well, he just introduced his budget proposal yesterday. $618 million worth of corporate incentives and tax cuts, which are happening at the same time that Republican leaders are asking members of the Higher Education Appropriations Committee, members such as myself, to make cuts of up to 10% to the state's higher education budget. There's a lot of ideas in the governor's package which can get Democratic support, including from members like myself, who would support the rolling back of commercial real estate tax, for example, which will put more money in the pockets of small business owners who can use that to hire new employees, and that will grow the economy. But the reality is that asking the legislature to pay for $618 million in corporate tax breaks on the backs of working students and working families is not something that I can support at this time.
Let's talk some things that will certainly divide, and that's gun control. And this is a very personal one for you as well. You know, there are two sides. Of all the issues, this is probably the one I think that may be the most divisive between the two. When you look at this, are there areas of common ground?
There are areas of common ground, I hope, around universal background checks. Right now, there's a gigantic loophole in state law that says that folks can buy firearms without having to submit themselves to a background check if they do it at a gun show, or if they do it online, or person to person. We have to close that loophole to keep our community safe. But what we also need to do right now is we need to understand that mental health care is part of the puzzle in addressing gun safety and gun violence in our state.
And we don't hear much about that.
No. Florida is 50th in the nation for funding for mental health care services. That has had a ripple effect not only on the health and well-being of our state, but also it is certainly a big part of addressing the epidemic of gun violence, to make sure that those who should not access firearms, who shouldn't have access to these types of weapons, are not able to.
Is that maybe part of, you know, when terrorism came on the scene nationally, people said if you see something, say something. Yet we report on stories all the time, and we will hear the family, we will hear the neighbors say, we just didn't see it coming. Maybe that people around you, that they look for signs of a mental health or something disturbing.
But I'm glad you brought that up, Ryan, the See Something, Say Something program, because that is totally based on the community's relationship and trust of law enforcement. Right. In a situation right now that we have where the White House is issuing un-American and unconstitutional immigration orders that basically sow distrust between undocumented populations and law enforcement, it makes it substantially less likely that folks will come forward to report suspicious activity if they don't trust law enforcement, or if they believe that if they step forward, they're going to get deported. Central Florida in particular is disproportionately impacted by this. There are 8,000 residents in Orange County who are the beneficiaries of the DACA program, just for example, that keeps young people in the United States from getting deported if they came here, were brought over from their parents from another country through no fault of their own. This has a major impact on the state of Florida, and we have to address immigration reform in a serious and comprehensive way, not in a knee-jerk, disastrous, divisive way, the way President Trump has.
Are you hopeful that, as rough as it was coming out of the gate, that they said, look, in some ways this wasn't rolled out well, that maybe it's not as bad from your perspective as what it seemed? It's not, hey, we're not letting you all in. We want to take a look at these documents. We want to take a look at this when those people were held up at the airport, because they all did get out.
But when you look at the facts, you see 7 nations are on the travel ban restriction, which we know was based on wanting to keep Muslims out of the United States.
But then why not keep India out?
Well, and that's the question is,
I mean,
why?
when they say Muslim ban, why not take the country that is the biggest Muslim population?
Well, and why? Well, because you find many of the Muslim majority countries that were kept off the list were countries that had Trump hotels in them. And then the Cato Institute, which is a conservative think tank, ran the numbers on the number of United States citizens who were killed by citizens of these 7 countries from 1975 to 2015. And they found all 7 countries, 0 American citizens were killed by any of the citizens of these countries. What's the rhyme or reason for this law or these rules? I think that it was a total disaster. It wasn't thought through and needs to be clearer moving forward, and certainly based on facts, not on knee-jerk ideology that is mostly Islamophobic.
Right, and you'll see more debate on this. There's no question. I mean, we could talk about this for an hour and go forward a little bit. Just a couple minutes left now. When you look at the areas of gun control beyond, obviously, what happened at Pulse makes it a very emotional issue here. Will that impact things at the State House, do you think? It certainly does in Central Florida for a number of lawmakers. Will it impact the State House?
I think that it will, because many of those folks who were impacted by the tragedy at Pulse will be traveling to Tallahassee this legislative session to tell their story. And they're folks that sit at the intersections of oppression. You have so many LGBT people who are impacted, so many people of color from the Black and African American community, and also the Latino community, who find themselves to be double minorities, who are impacted not just by LGBT equality and gun safety, but they're also impacted by access to health insurance. Many of them are uninsured or underinsured. They are impacted by immigration policy. Many of those survivors themselves are undocumented. And so all of these issues intersect for them, and I think that their stories are going to be very powerful this legislative session.
We are out of time, but I want to give you a chance for people that are out there watching. We always say, contact your congressman, contact your state representative. What is the best way for someone watching that wants to have their voice heard?
Absolutely. Well, what they can do is they can go to myfloridahouse.gov, and they can find who their representative is, and they can even find my member page there. And if they have feedback, if they want to set a meeting, they want to tell me to support or oppose a particular bill, they can click on the contact information there, call our office, or send us an email. And we want to hear back from the people of Florida, because they are who elected me to serve, certainly.
Right. Carlo, it's always great to talk to you. Appreciate you coming in. Best of luck as we near the March legislative session.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
We're going to take a quick break here on Orlando Matters. When we come back, we'll wrap things up. Stay with us.